Okay, hello, fellow book readers. My name is John, and today I want to talk about The Witcher short stories. So this week I have read The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny for the first time. I do plan on reading the rest of the series, but while these two books are fresh in my head, what I want to do is sort of rank the short stories. I want to do this while it's still fresh in my head. Now, there is a negative to this. The negative is that I don't have like context for the future of the series in my head because I haven't read all the books yet, and I have gone into the series pretty blind. But just on their face, like on the face, what do I think of these short stories? So before we start, let's just talk about the ranks for my tier list, and I rank them how I rank my books, generally speaking. Uh, so the first tier, the top tier, is perfect. So this is like 5-star stories. These are the stories I loved. Nothing about them I would change. I thought they were absolutely perfect. The second tier would be great, which is these are where I put my 4-star books, even my 4.5-star books. These are like near perfect. There might be like one or two things that stop it from being a perfect book, or maybe it just doesn't peak as high as I would say like a perfect story would peak. But they're still great. These are stories I would reread time and time again. And then next tier is good. These are stories that I enjoyed reading. These is like the 3 to 3.5 star range, where it's like, I really enjoyed reading these things. Maybe there's some more things about it that I didn't like that stop it from getting into like the great tier. But for the most part, everything about the story was enjoyable, and I'm glad I read it. And then the next would be the meh category. I usually call this the fine category, but meh fine. It's about the same thing. These are the 2 to 2.5 star range books where it's like, yeah, these stories might be good, but they're just not for me. Usually in these stories, there's like things I equally amount hate and like, or maybe it just didn't pique my interest as much, or I couldn't keep my eyes on the page. Occasionally, you'll find like a story or a book in this category where it's like I really just hated the ending and it kind of ruined the story for me, but that's more rare. Yeah. So these aren't like the worst things in the world, but these are definitely not things that I loved or even really liked all that much. And then there's the 1-star stories or books, and this is just the I hated it category. These are things that I absolutely thought terrible. I personally didn't enjoy. I wanted to skip, but I ended up finishing. So we're going to start with The Witcher, which is the first story in The Last Wish. This is the first story in The Witcher. First overall story he wrote. First short story I think he ever written. Period. In like any sort of thing. At least that he got published. So yeah, this story is short, but I love it. I thought this was a great story. To me, this story had like Castlevania video game vibes. That's what I felt like. And it's really the only story in the collection that felt like that to me. And I was expecting more of that. This story has Geralt fighting a Citra, which is like the monster of the story. And in this story, you really get to see his strength. And this is like really the only story in the bunch where Geralt really does not have a Geralt doesn't really have a problem with like actually fighting the monster. Like he kind of beats it pretty easily. He does sort of get like severely wounded, but to me, it never felt like he was in danger in this story. Where the others, a lot of times he was in danger like beyond his control, and I really enjoyed that about this story because that's how kind of I always imagined The Witcher to be. Like I said, I really love the setting. I love the plot of this one. In this story, it's this king hires Geralt to break the curse on his daughter. His daughter is the monster of the story. She's a Citra, which is sort of like this vampire thing. And he wants him to break the curse. His child has been cursed because he slept with his sister, and that's how the child was conceived. And then there's these other people in the town that are like, no, Geralt, we'll pay you more if you kill the monster. So Geralt kind of has to make this decision about if he's going to kill it or try to break the curse. In the end, he does try to break the curse, and he succeeds. And it has like kind of a sweet emotional ending to it, and I really enjoy the characters here. And like I said, the setting is what really carries it for me in this one. And I thought the battle was great. So yeah, this is a great story for me. Okay, and the next story is called A Grain of Truth. So this story is sort of a Beauty and the Beast retelling. At least that's how I read it. Where Geralt runs into this. He runs into these two bodies in like this forested area, and he traces it to like this house, and this house has this monster living in it. The monster's named Novella, and he's sort of like this bear slash boar looking monster. And he threatens Gerald, but in reality, he's not a very threatening monster, and he invites Gerald inside his house, and his house is magical. So this monster, Nivellen, he was actually cursed because he raped a priestess, and the priestess cursed him before she died. And he had been not kidnapping, he had been bribing fathers to leave their daughters at his house to try to break the curse. And he's been, he would keep these daughters for a few months and he would sort of like raise them, try to look after them. He wouldn't harm them at all. And then he would give them back to their father. But it was not breaking his curse. So eventually he just gave up on breaking the curse and he would still keep bringing the daughters to him because he enjoyed the daughters. He was enjoying their company. He wasn't harming them at all. He was enjoying their company. But lately that has stopped. He'd stopped taking daughters because he has found another monster who he loves. Geralt warns him that this monster is dangerous and she is killing people. He doesn't buy it. He's like, get off my property. So Geralt leaves, but then he ends up coming back and him and the monster fight. And Nivellen, he ends up interfering and he kills the monster before the monster can kill Geralt. While the monster's dying, the monster tells Geralt that she loves Nivellen, and that breaks his curse. So the monster dies, Nivellen's curse is broke by true love. And it's sort of like a happily ever after thing. This story, I don't know. I didn't really feel bad for the monster. The monster did a terrible thing. He deserved to be cursed. I don't think you're supposed to feel bad for the monster. That's not what it's going for, but I just didn't care about the monster at all. I didn't think the fight was all that interesting. It was still good, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't like amazing. Very predictable. It did have a little bit of humor to it. I don't know. This isn't my favorite of the stories. It's good, not great. I'm going to put it in the good category. Okay, next up is The Lesser Evil. And this is my favorite story in the bunch. I love this story from front to back. Genuinely, I don't love like sort of ambiguity endings. And this is a very ambiguity ending because we don't know if Gerald made the right choice. This story presents Gerald with a problem. He's in this city and he visits the sorcerer who tells Gerald that this assassin is trying to kill him. And he explains the curse of the Black Sun, I think it's called, where all the princesses born on this certain day are demented and evil, and he had gone about imprisoning these sorceresses and like examining their bodies, and he's like, I have proof that they're all evil. It sounds very fishy, and there's this one princess who ended up kind of escaping. He tells the story about how she has since been haunting villages and murdering people and left and right, and now she's chasing him down as her goal is to kill him, and he is going to die tomorrow because she is in the city. So then Geralt leaves. He's like, I don't believe you. This is nonsense. I'm not going to help kill this girl. That's against my code. I would never do that. So he leaves and he goes to the bar where he meets Renfri, who is the girl from the Sorcerer's Story. And Renfri tells him that, well, the sorcerer's lying to you. I'm just a normal girl, and my stepmother and this sorcerer guy had me leave the castle with this man, and this man was tried to kill me. But he ended up getting cold feet after he raped me, and I was able to run away. And since then, I've joined up with a bunch of elves to sort of avenge my cause. She asked Geralt to help her kill the sorcerer. Geralt declines. He's like, I'm not going to do that. And then they have a conversation about the lesser evil. Is it okay to do something if it's the lesser evil? It might still be evil, but what if the greater evil's there but you have to do something and it's the lesser evil? Is that okay? And Geralt's like, no evil's okay. That's not okay. I wouldn't do that. So he leaves after Renfri agrees to leave the town. Renfri's like, okay, you're right. I'll leave the town. He goes and talks to, I think it's the mayor. But they have a conversation, and Geralt realizes Renfri lied to him, and Renfri is actually going to start slaughtering civilians with her elves to draw the sorcerer out to kill him. So Geralt goes to the town, and he kills he kills all the elves, and then he ends up dueling Renfri and killing her. And then the sorcerer comes out to give this girl an autopsy, and Geralt tells him to leave. He's like, you have to leave immediately. Go away. You're awful. And then the mayor kicks Geralt out of town, and that's how he earns the Butcher of Blaviken nickname or moniker. So that's sort of like the plot. I was a long-winded version of the plot, and I'm sure I forgot a few things and didn't exactly describe everything right. But it leaves us sort of an ambiguity note. Like, did Geralt do the right thing? And is Renfri actually a monster? Like, is the Curse of the Black Sun real? Is she actually a monster? Or is she just somebody that wants revenge? And I'm on the side where she just kind of wanted revenge. I don't believe she's a monster, but we're never outright told. And it's like we sort of have to think about it on our own. And generally, I don't love that, but I think the story does a fabulous job with it. And it presents us with such a great question: is the lesser evil like okay? And yeah, I really love the story, and I love the characters that were involved. Renfri is awesome. That sorcerer, or I think he's actually just a mage. That mage is just sort of a bastard, and I don't like him at all. And obviously, Gerald's kick ass in the story still. Yeah, great story. I love this one. It's my favorite of the bunch. Okay, next up is a question of price. And this is kind of like another Beauty and the Beast retelling. It borrows from multiple different fairy tales, including like Cinderella. Yeah, this one's good. It's a very good story. I think it takes a long time to get going, though. There's a lot of characters here that are kind of thrown at you, and you don't really get to know them all very well because, again, it's a short story. I feel like we get an overload of characters. So here, the Queen of Cintra is inviting a bunch of people to her palace to marry her daughter. She's like, she's going to marry one of these people today. I'm going to choose. But she also invites Geralt to complete a task that she won't tell him. We end up finding out that the task is to get rid of this monster that her husband, who had died, promised their daughter to before she was born. So the queen tricks this monster, and we end up finding out this monster's a beast. Like, he takes off his helmet before midnight, and we see that he's a monster. What we later learn is that the daughter actually wants to marry this monster, and this monster's not bad. He was cursed, unjustly, I might add, to be a monster until he finds true love. So she wants to marry him, but her mother won't let her. Her mother, the queen, won't let her. And then she starts raging, and her scream is like magic, and she starts knocking people down. Geralt saves everybody. The daughter and the monster admit their love to each other and commit each other to their lives with a plan to marry in the future. The queen, which breaks his curse, he becomes normal, and the queen offers Geralt a reward for fixing everything and making sure everybody didn't die. And Geralt, he asked for the princesses and the monster's future daughter, or not future daughter, future child, to become a witcher. That's his price. That's the price he had for accomplishing his goal. And they agree to it, and that's the end of the story. It's a good story. Like I said, it does take a while to get going. There's a lot of debate, a lot of talking between characters that you don't really get to know very well. I think the queen is an awesome character. I really loved her as a character. The princess and the monster, they were interesting, but not overly interesting. Geralt's great. The premise of the story is awesome. It sets up a bunch of future events, so that's awesome. But the story by itself is just good, not great. I would put it ahead of A Grain of Truth, personally. That's just my personal opinion. Hey, and then we got The Edge of the World. And in this story, we meet Dandelion, who is awesome. Dandelion, one of my favorite characters in these short stories. He's sort of this poet, laureate, musician type thing, traveling minstrel, shall I say. Very humorous, very funny, kind of wacky. He's scared of so much stuff, but also he's not scared of things. He follows Geralt everywhere. So they live in this farmland / village where these people are going to pay Geralt to get rid of this devil. I say devil with quotation marks. It's not actually a devil. I forget what it's called, but he's just this little dude who's very, very smart. That's his quality. He's very smart. He's not a monster. It's against Geralt's code to kill him, but he does engage the monster, and he's like, "What if you just leave? Can you just leave? I don't want to fight you." But it turns out it was a trap. This devil, again with the quotation marks, is actually working for these elves who live in the mountains. And there's been sort of a genocide against these elves, and now they're here for revenge. So they knock out Geralt and Dandelion, and they're going to execute Geralt and Dandelion because they don't want them to tell the villagers about, their plan, because they're actually hired the devil to steal grain and food for them. So they're going to execute them. Very unjust to them, I might add. They could have done a number of other things other than execute them. So they're going to execute them when the Queen of the Fields, the Silent Queen who we met earlier in the story, she never speaks, comes and saves them. She talks with the elves. She's like, "You guys got to go." She basically tells them, "You got to go back to your mountain. What you're doing is just as wrong as what the villagers are doing. We can't have that." I think she's a really great character, even though we don't really get to hear her. So her and Dandelion sort of carry the story for me. Again, Geralt doesn't really do much in this story. He gets captured. That's basically what he does. No, it's not a real good action story. I think the elves are just terrible characters. I think the villagers are terrible characters. This is the only story that's meh for me in The Last Wish. Like I said, it's not terrible. I didn't hate my time here because I thought there was some really good stuff with Dandelion in particular. And then we got The Last Wish, which is obviously the story the book is named after. It's also the longest story, I think, in the book. I like this one a lot. So here we meet Yennefer, and Yennefer's awesome. She's like super shades of gray, and you can tell she's caring and all this other stuff, but she's also like very unhappy. So Geralt and Dandelion run into this genie where they're granted three wishes. I say genie, it's not actually called the genie, I forget what it's called, but this genie runs away before he can grant, you know, the last two wishes. And this genie can kind of cause all sorts of chaos. He very, very badly injures Dandelion, who Geralt brings to this village to sort of get healed. He brings her to Yennefer. Yennefer heals him, but Yennefer tricks Geralt, and she sort of puts him under a curse where Geralt will go and like sort of humiliate her enemies in the town because this town bans sorceresses and they do not want Yennefer there. So in doing so, she humiliates Geralt and actually gets him imprisoned. Geralt then learns he puts together that actually he has the three wishes for the genie, not Dandelion, and he uses one of these wishes to kill one of the guards. And then they bring up Gerald, and they're like, "Well, I'm gonna have to kill you now because you killed this guard. I don't know why the hell you did that." And Gerald's like, "We got bigger problems." Yennefer, she's trying to capture this genie. Yennefer plans to actually take this genie and like absorb its power and become like more powerful. She believes she can defeat the genie on its own. So she like baits the genie to come back to her, and she has it trapped in a spell, and all hell breaks loose in the village. And Geralt runs into there and saves her. She uses the last wish to save her. We don't exactly know what the last wish is, which I loved. I loved it. The end, the house like sort of blows up, but Yennefer and Geralt are under it, and they, you know, have fun. Really good story. I love the action in this one. The genie fight with Yennefer and Geralt is so good. I love Yennefer as a character. I love that we don't know what the last wish is. I kind of love the way it ended. I thought this is a great story. It's not perfect because, you know, it is a bit long, I would say, but it does deliver. I would put it ahead of The Witcher. And then we have The Voice of Reason, which is sort of the through thread story of The Last Wish. I find it weird to count this one because you don't get this all in one. So, like, how the story works is you get, like, part of it before the first story in The Witcher, and then part of it after the first story in The Last Wish, and then part of it after that. And it sort of connects all the stories because the story is about how. So in the first story in this book, The Witcher, Geralt gets seriously injured. He gets like his neck slit when he was fighting the Citra. So the story is about him healing. Like one of the priestesses brought him back to the temple, and she's healing him. And they're sort of going over Geralt's life. So like he'll be talking about, well, I did make a promise to have this one child be a Witcher when they get older, when they're born and they get older. And then we get like the question of price story, and then it's like, well, I did meet this girl Yennefer once, and then the priestess talks about how Yennefer actually came there and came to the temple while Geralt was healing, and we get the Yennefer story. We get the Last Wish, and there'll be a story about like, well, what's the lesser evil, and we get the story of the lesser evil. So yeah, we get that. It's sort of the plot thread that puts all the stories together, but it also tells its own story. So there's just like knights called I think they're called the White Rose or something like that. And they want Geralt gone. And the priestess is like, well, Geralt's not leaving until he's healed. And they're like, no, he has to leave now. And that's sort of like the plot thread of that particular short story. And in the end, we get this really great scene where Geralt leaves the temple and he goes and duels this one member of the White Rose, and he beats them without actually hitting him himself. So yeah, that fight was great, and I think it's just a really good ending. It's really sweet. I love the characters here. The dwarf, I really love the two like sort of jerk knights, and Geralt's just great in the story. And the priestess, she's awesome. It's a great character story more than a plot story, but it does have its moments. Like I said, the ending fight was really good. This is a good story. I would put it ahead of A Grain of Truth. Okay, and then we moved on to the Sword of Destiny. The first story is The Bounds of Reason, and this is the dragon story. Look, the Golden Dragon is awesome, both in his dragon form and his human form. Three Jackdaw is awesome when he's a human, and I honestly didn't say Saxon to be the dragon. I probably should have. And then he becomes this Golden Dragon, and the Golden Dragon's amazing. And we get a lot of Yennefer, Geralt in this story. We get a couple great Yennefer Geralt moments. And this story begins with Yennefer and Geralt. They're separated, right? And it sort of brings us their story of why they're separated, how they can't get along. So in the story, they're fighting again, but then in the end, they're sort of back together, which is what they do a lot in these short stories. Yeah. So that part, I thought that part ruled, but it's also, it does get tiresome. It doesn't get tiresome in this story, though. This story, it's awesome with it. And I really like the dragon. I love the dragon character, and I love the fight with the dragon. What I didn't love is the length of this story. I think it's a little bit too long for what it is, and the amount of characters. There's just way too many characters. Again, they flood us with characters in the story, and I don't think it works because you don't get to know them all. It really annoyed me how many characters there were here because I was just like, I don't get to know these characters really well, and I want to know them better. And I think the plot suffers for it because it's so long, but it doesn't need to be that long. It's only that long because of the characters, and we don't even really get to know them that well. So for me, this is just meh. I would put it ahead of The Edge of the World for sure. It's teetering on the edge of good. It just, for me, it just falls slightly below it. It's probably like if I was doing star ratings, it would be a 2.5-star book, where The Edge of the World is just a 2-star book or story. So there we go with that one. Okay, and then next up we got A Shard of Ice. This is my least favorite story in this in the Sword of Destiny. Again, the story is just about Yennefer and Geralt fighting, and I love Yennefer and I love Geralt, but it got tiresome here. It really did. They're just fighting again, no reason basically. And we know Yennefer's problem. She wants children, but she can't have children. She wants Geralt to say she loves her, but Geralt just like can't do that. And then you got her sleeping with her ex-lover in this story, and it's like, well, why'd you do that? Well, I do like him too, and it's who's she gonna end up with? So this story, the premise is Geralt and the ex-lover are gonna fight over Yennefer. But Yennefer really just wants like what she can't have from either of these two guys, and they don't get that. She can't live without it. So they're gonna go fight over her because she's Yennefer, and she deserves to be fought over. But Yennefer ends up leaving the morning of, so they're gonna fight over her. But before they could fight, Yennefer leaves. She's like, I'm not gonna be with either of you. I have to go. And the ex-lover still wants to fight Geralt, but Geralt's like, nope, I'm not gonna fight you anymore. I don't care enough. And through it all, we have another plot thread going where like the City Watch really hates Geralt, and they're trying to like kill him. This story is just—it's not my favorite. Just too much Yennefer and Geralt fighting, and again, they just end up leaving each other again, which they had just gotten back together in the previous story. It felt not great to me. And then we got The Eternal Flame. I like this story a lot. So this story focuses on a halfling and a mimic, who is this monster who can like directly copy people. So he can like look like anybody in the world. He can see their thoughts. He can talk like them. So he copies this halfling, and he steals his 2 horses, and he sells them for money, and then he invests all of the halfling's money into various crops and other things that the halfling thinks are completely useless. So he wants Geralt to capture this monster. This mimic, I should say. And then we got the town who's like, well, you owe taxes. He tells the halfling, you owe taxes, otherwise we're going to throw you in the dungeon. But of course, the halfling has no money because the mimic took it all and invested in these terrible crops. So it's a race to like find this mimic to solve everything. And then we meet the high priest of this town who guards the eternal flame, who wants Geralt to leave because there would never be a monster in this town. The eternal flame prevents that from happening. So now they have to deal with this priest as well. In the end, they find out the mimic was actually helping the halfling, probably unintentionally, but still, he helped them. He paid off his taxes. Those crops he bought are actually very, very useful, and they made the halfling a ton of money. And the mimic comes back and tells the halfling, I don't want any problems. I just want a place to live. So the halfling adopts him as like his long-lost cousin. And then we find out the priestess is actually another mimic who was imitating the priest. And he's actually working for them too. And it's all happily ever after. Really good twists and turns here. Really good characters. I think the mimics are awesome. I think the halfling's awesome. Yeah, the lions in this, Dandelion's great. The only problem is there's not enough Geralt in this story. He's just not in this story enough. And even when he is, he's kind of like a secondary character. But it doesn't stop the story from being good. It's a good story. I can't put it in the great tier because, there's just not enough Geralt in this one. But I would put it ahead of A Question of Price. Put it at the top of the good tier. It's a good story, just not a great one. A Little Sacrifice. Another perfect story. Oh, dude, this story's awesome. So in this one, this king hires Geralt to be a translator for this mermaid who he loves. And he wants the mermaid to make a sacrifice to come on land for him. She has to become a land person, grow legs instead of abandon your spins, become basically immortal. And the mermaid, who also loves him, is like, well, how about if you just become a sea person instead? He's like, well, I can't breathe underwater, so I can't do that. That would kill me. And she doesn't understand that. She's like, no, you should make a sacrifice for me. So she runs away, back underwater. And then we find out later that there's these sea monsters that are attacking these pearlers in the kingdom. And the king wants Geralt to go fight these pearlers. Not fight the pearls, fight the sea monsters that attack the pearls. And Geralt's like, well, I don't fight sea monsters. He's like, oh, do it anyway, I'll pay you. And then we meet Essie, who is another character in this story, and Essie loves Geralt on first sight. Right? She loves him. And Geralt likes her, but obviously he doesn't love her. He loves Yennefer. He's like, I can't be with you. Also, he just doesn't really feel the emotion of love. So there's that. But she loves him, and she's stuck and very depressed that she loves him because she knows he can't be with her. So Geralt goes and fights these sea monsters with Dandelion, and the sea monsters end up kicking their ass. Basically, they end up having to run for their life. Geralt kind of helped save Dandelion, I should say, from these sea monsters. But in the end, they end up getting these one pearl. They end up getting a pearl, which Geralt gives to Essie as a gift. After they heal Dandelion, the king was like, well, you have to go kill these monsters. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to kill these sea monsters. You have to not go in the ocean. You have to make that sacrifice to not go where they're going. Have this small sacrifice. When the tide is low, do not go near their kingdom. And the king's like, I am not going to make this sacrifice. And then the mermaid comes in and interrupts. And she's no longer a mermaid. She has two legs. She's like, I have made the small sacrifice for you. I love you. The king is like, I'll make this small sacrifice not to go near the sea kingdom and disturb them during low tide. Right? So that's sort of the thorough thread of making the small sacrifices. And then the story ends with Dandelion writing a song for Essie and Geralt, and they have one night together, and it's a beautiful moment that's immortalized by Dandelion. And then they go their separate ways, and we get this. The story tells us what Essie's future is, and it's very heartbreaking and tragic. And oh man, my heart just breaks for her. And this story's so good, and the theming in it is perfect. And I did a terrible job of describing it. I'm sorry, but yeah, this story's awesome. Perfect here for sure. And then we get the Sword of Destiny, and this story is about this is the story where we finally get to meet the child that Geralt was promised in A Question of Price. So it's going to be his child to become a Witcher. So Geralt's in this forest, and he runs into this child who is being taken by these dryads to the dryad queen, the queen of the forest, basically. So Geralt is able to go with them because he's met this queen before. He knows where this kingdom is. So he goes with them and he begs the queen not to take this girl, who he finds out is a princess, because that'll start a war with this other kingdom. And because the forest queen, the dryad queen, is going to turn this princess into a dryad. That's like her thing. She'll give her a potion and she'll turn into a dryad. It's like, if you do that, you're going to start a war with the humans. You don't want this war. We don't need bloodshed. Let's not do this. And she's like, oh, I'm going to do it. The dryad queen's like, I'm going to do it. It's a question of it's destiny. Destiny will decide her fate. So she gives her the potion and she drinks it and she doesn't become a dryad. And Geralt's shocked. How did it not happen? And the child's like, I want to go with you, Geralt. And he realizes that the child's destiny is to be a witcher. She is the child from his past. He now realizes it. This is when we meet Ciri. Ciri is awesome in this story. I love her. She is great. So good. Such a good character. This story is awesome. It's one of my favorites. I would put it ahead of The Last Wish in the great category. It's not perfect because, there's not a whole lot of action in here. There is action at the end. In the end, these humans are trying to trick everybody into believing the dryads had attacked them so they can start a war with the dryad kingdom. Geralt and Ciri stuff it out, and they stop it. They kill them all before they can start this war. And then Geralt sends Ciri back with the druid to her mother, the queen. She's like, I'm not taking you. You're not coming with me. It's too dangerous. I'm not going to do it. You're not going to become a witcher. I was wrong. So that's how the story ends. But yeah, this story's great. Just a really great story. It just doesn't quite hit the perfect here for me, but it's very, very close. Like I said, it's a little bit too long, and I think the action isn't as good as it could have been. But the suspense in it is top notch, and the mystery of the little girl, which we could figure out pretty easily, but Geralt just takes forever to figure out, is so good. Yeah, I love this one. And then we get the final story in Sword of Destiny, which is Something More, which is an interesting story. This is the only story like this in the bunch. It's sort of a story of montages, right? So we start off the story with Geralt getting severely injured, saving this merchant. And then while the merchant is healing him, we get a flashback to Beltane, which is this fire holiday. And Geralt's in a village celebrating this fire holiday. And there he sees Yennefer, who is also celebrating this fire holiday. And they come together and they have a night together, a night to remember together. And it's filled with love, but it's also filled with sort of their old past problems they talk about. They can't get over, but they have a night of love and passion. And it's a really, really great scene. And then we go back to the present day, and we see Geralt, who has just been sort of healed, semi-healed by this merchant. And he has another fever dream where we get Geralt finally went back to Citra 6 years after he was there in a question of price, and he talks to the queen again. He's here to pick up the child of destiny, to become the Witcher. And the queen doesn't want to give him up, so he gives him a test where she puts out 10 children. If you can pick out the right one, she can go with you, or whichever child you pick will go with you. Doesn't matter who it is, will go with you. It might not be the child it might not be the prince or princess, though. Geralt's I'm not going to pick out a child. That's wrong. Being a witcher's hard. And then they have this conversation, and they talk where Geralt confirms everything this queen suspects about how hard it is to become a witcher and how most people don't survive it. And he's like, you're right. I'm not going to take your child. It was wrong for me to even ask for one to begin with. I'm going to leave. And the queen's like, you'll be back, and when you are, I will actually probably be dead. And then we go back to the present day, and Geralt's completely healed now, and a sorceress has healed him. And we find out this sorceress is Geralt's mother, and they have a really emotional scene together where Geralt tries to get her to stay, and she's like, no, I'm leaving. But not before she tells him these group of army is attacking and just killing people at random. And they actually killed 14 sorceresses. And then we get another scene where Geralt is near this obelisk on top of a hill, and this other being tells him to read the last name on there. That's the person who's going to die. And he's like, Yennefer, it's Yennefer. And it's like, yes. And it's like, come with me. And he's like, no, no. And then we go back to present day, and Geralt's with the sorcerer, and it's like, well, no, Yennefer's not the last name on that obelisk. That's somebody different, and you know who it is. And we never get the answer to who he knows it is. It's sort of left cryptic. And then we get the next scene where it's him and Dandelion together, and Dandelion talks about how Citra has fell to these group of armed people who are just shattering kingdoms left and right, and they killed the queen, and they got the massacre in its thing. And Gerald's heartbroken because he was on his way to Citra to pick up Ciri, because he's changed his mind. He wants her to be the Witcher. He wants to train her as a Witcher, and now he thinks Ciri is dead. So he's just heartbroken. So he accompanies Dandelion across the river with the merchant, and they go to the merchant's house. And the merchant's wife tells the merchant that they adopted a new daughter who came here, and the daughter ends up being Ciri. And Ciri and Geralt run into each other, and they hug. And Ciri's like, "You're gonna take me, right, Geralt?" And Geralt's like, "Yes, I will take you. You are mine," basically. And it's a really heartfelt ending. And I love the montage nature of this story. I wish there was another one like that in here. I really love stories like that. So yeah, this one's great. I would put it right behind The Sword of Destiny. And that is my complete ranking of the Witcher stories. I had a really great time reading these stories. And as you can tell, I didn't hate a single story. Not one story fell in the hated it category. There was a few that were just meh, especially the beginning of Sword of Destiny. I thought the beginning of Sword of Destiny was kind of rough. But the last 3 stories of Sword of Destiny were amazing, perfect, great stories. And all of Last Wish. Last Wish is just phenomenal. There's so many great stories in Last Wish. So I had a great time with that. And these are my Witcher tier lists. I'm interested to see if they will change as I read the rest of the series. But I want to do this video, just get my short story thoughts out there. So there they are. Let me know below what your favorite short story in The Witcher is. What your least favorite is.